muscle cars, the roar of a V8 engine, the smell of burning rubber, and the sheer adrenaline rush. But what if I told you some of these beasts could turn your dream ride into a nightmare? Today we're exposing 10 muscle cars you should never buy. Stick around because number 3 might shock you. Starting at number 10, the 1978 to 1983 Dodge Challenger SE, a name that should scream power and dominance, but this version, it barely whispers. With a base engine that produced just 105 horsepower, it had about as much muscle as a family sedan. Imagine trying to flex at a stoplight and getting smoked by a modern hatchback. Despite the muscle car badge, it was a far cry from its legendary predecessors. Dodge's attempt to relaunch the Challenger during the late 70s and early 80s was a major flop. This car came with a 2.6-liter engine that barely could keep up, and with its heavy body, it felt sluggish and underwhelming. The Challenger SE was also notorious for its rust problems, particularly around the undercarriage and wheel wells. A lot of these cars looked great on the outside, but were hiding some serious structural issues underneath. A muscle car should make you feel like a king on the road, but with this one, you'll be lucky to make it to the next intersection without hearing the dreaded check engine light come on. If you're thinking about buying one today, make sure to check the frame, because it could cost you big time to fix. Next up, we have the 1982 to 1992 Chevrolet Camaro, a car that's often regarded as a relic of the 80s. While the Camaro name holds a rich legacy in muscle car history, this particular model was a huge disappointment for fans. Now, we know the Camaro can be an absolute beast in its prime, but the 1980s version? Not so much. One of the most shocking things about this model is the engine choices and/or lack thereof. While the early Camaros came with the mighty V8 engines that roared on the road, the 80s models were all about fuel economy and emissions. The base engine was a 2.5-liter four-cylinder, and the most powerful option was the 5.7-liter V8, which produced a meager 170 horsepower. That's less power than what you'd get in a modern compact car. If you're buying a muscle car to feel the power, you're not going to get it from this version. And here's the real kicker. The Camaro's reliability in the 80s was far from stellar. The engines were often plagued with problems like overheating, and the suspension system was weak, leading to poor handling. And let's not forget the interior. It looked like it was designed in a rush. The seats were uncomfortable, the dashboard was basic, and the whole cabin felt more like a rental car than a high-performance machine. At number 8, we have the Ford Mustang II. The Mustang is one of the most iconic muscle cars in history, but not all of its iterations live up to the hype. The Mustang II was a product of the fuel crisis of the 1970s, and Ford was trying to make a smaller, more fuel-efficient version of the Mustang. But in doing so, they pretty much ruined what made the Mustang legendary. The Mustang II was a major step backward. Instead of the iconic V8 engine that people had come to love, Ford offered a 2.3-liter four-cylinder engine with just 88 horsepower. To put that into perspective, a Toyota Corolla from the same era could give it a run for its money. If you were expecting the raw power and performance of the previous Mustangs, this version would leave you sorely disappointed. To make matters worse, the Mustang II's handling was terrible, and the build quality wasn't much better. It was prone to rust, and the suspension system didn't have the rigidity to handle high speeds or sharp turns. If you're looking for a muscle car that can give you that thrilling driving experience, this one is definitely not it. Coming in at number 7 is the 1975 to 1980 Pontiac Firebird. The Firebird is another classic muscle car name, but this generation failed to live up to the reputation. Pontiac tried to continue the legacy of the Firebird, but unfortunately the 70s and early 80s versions were significantly underwhelming. The biggest problem? Emissions regulations. The Firebird's engines were choked by environmental regulations, and as a result, the performance suffered. The 5.0-liter V8 engine, which should have been a powerhouse, produced a dismal 160 horsepower, less than what many modern sedans are capable of. The handling was sluggish, the acceleration was poor, and the overall driving experience didn't offer the muscle car feel that enthusiasts crave. Additionally, like many cars from this era, the Firebird had significant reliability issues. The rust was a huge problem, and the electrical systems in these cars were notoriously faulty. If you were unlucky, you could end up with a car that not only didn't perform well, but also left you with a hefty repair bill. At number 6, we have the 2005 to 2010 Chrysler 300C, which might surprise some people. After all, it looks like a big, powerful muscle car with an imposing presence. But if you look beyond its good looks, you'll find that it's not as impressive as it seems. Sure, the 300C comes with a 5.7-liter Hemi V8 engine, but the overall performance doesn't match the hype. It weighs over 4,000 pounds, and while it has decent acceleration, it doesn't handle like you'd expect from a muscle car. The suspension is stiff, making for a rough ride, and the interior, while luxurious, feels more like a family sedan than a performance machine. The real problem, however, is the maintenance costs. The 300C's transmission and electrical systems have been known to fail, and repairs can be expensive. It's one of those cars that might seem like a good idea initially, but once you factor in the repair bills and subpar driving experience, it quickly becomes clear that it's not worth the investment. Next, we have the 1970 to 1973 Mercury Cougar, a car that was marketed as a more refined version of the Ford Mustang. But the truth is, it never quite lived up to the expectations. The Cougar had a similar design to the Mustang, but was supposed to offer a more luxurious experience. While it did have some nice features, such as a more comfortable ride, it didn't provide the performance that muscle car fans were looking for. The Cougar was offered with a variety of engine options, but none of them were particularly impressive. The 3.9-liter V8 engine, for example, produced only 210 horsepower, which is weak by muscle car standards. While the Cougar had a more refined interior, its lack of performance and limited engine options made it a poor choice for anyone looking for true muscle. Moreover, the Cougar had a reputation for being prone to rust, and parts for these cars can be hard to find today. The combination of underwhelming performance, lackluster engine options, and poor reliability makes the Mercury Cougar a muscle car you might want to avoid. Yes, the Chevrolet Corvette is an iconic muscle car, but the 1984 to 1996 model is one you might want to skip. While the Corvette name is synonymous with speed, innovation, and performance, this particular era was plagued by issues that overshadowed its potential. The C4 Corvette had a plastic body which made it lighter but also less durable. Over time, these Corvettes were prone to cracking, fading, and other cosmetic issues. Under the hood, the base engine was a 5.7-liter V8, producing 230 horsepower, decent but not enough to really set the world on fire in the 80s and 90s. The handling was stiff, the ride was rough, and the overall driving experience left much to be desired. But the biggest issue? The electronics. The C4 Corvette was one of the first cars to feature a computerized dashboard, and it was riddled with glitches. The digital display often malfunctioned, and the complex electrical system was prone to failure. This meant expensive repairs, and a car that was more of a headache than a dream ride. Oldsmobile was once a key player in the muscle car world, and the 1977 to 1980 Oldsmobile 442 tried to keep that legacy alive. Unfortunately, it missed the mark. The 442 was known for its soft suspension and underpowered engine options. The 5.7-liter V8 engine was capable of producing around 180 horsepower, but it felt sluggish compared to other muscle cars of the time. Even though it came with some high-performance options, the 442 was essentially a shadow of its former self. In fact, many people consider the late 70s models to be a far cry from the glory days of Oldsmobile muscle cars. The build quality was subpar, and the suspension was too soft for any real performance driving. If you're looking for a muscle car that can hold its ground, the Oldsmobile 442 is one to avoid. Certainly, here's the continuation and completion of the script. The Buick GS should have been a muscle car powerhouse, but the reality was a bit different. The 1973 to 1975 models were heavily affected by the oil crisis, and Buick had to tone down the performance to meet stricter emissions regulations. The 455 cubic inch V8 engine, once a monster, now produced far less power and struggled to perform at the levels it was known for. While it had a solid chassis, the 455 V8 was detuned to produce just 200 horsepower in some models, which was a far cry from the car's true potential. In fact, many people view the Buick GS of this era as a mere shadow of its former glory. The build quality was questionable, and the car suffered from reliability issues that made it more of a headache than a joy to own. The suspension system wasn't optimized for high-speed driving either, meaning the handling was soft and uninspiring. If you're looking for a muscle car that can deliver raw, unfiltered power, the Buick GS from this era might not be the right choice for you. It's better left to collectors who appreciate the history behind it rather than anyone looking for a high-performance machine. And now we come to the most shocking one on this list, the 1992 to 2002 Dodge Viper. The Dodge Viper has earned its place in muscle car history, but early models were a disaster for most people. Sure, it had that monstrous 8.0-liter V10 engine and an incredible reputation for performance. But here's the truth. Driving a Viper was almost impossible for anyone who wasn't a professional driver. The car was notoriously difficult to handle, with a stiff suspension, no power steering, and no electronic stability control. Simply put, it was like trying to tame a wild animal. If you didn't have years of racing experience, you were likely to find yourself struggling to keep the Viper on the road, especially when pushing it to its limits. Even though it had a massive 400-plus horsepower V10 engine, the car's handling and lack of modern safety features made it a nightmare to drive for most owners. Plus, the interior was uncomfortable, cramped, and lacked any luxury touches, leaving you with a feeling of cheapness despite the car's high price tag. On top of that, maintenance costs were outrageous, and finding parts could be a pain. While the Viper was a powerful, iconic muscle car, its early years were plagued by design flaws and an unforgiving driving experience. If you're thinking of buying one today, be prepared for a bumpy ride, literally. All right, there you have it. These are the muscle cars that, while iconic in their own right, should probably stay off your shopping list. They may look the part, but don't let their powerful names fool you. In the end, a muscle car is only as good as the ride it offers. And trust me, you don't want to get stuck with a rust bucket or a beast that's more trouble than it's worth. Remember, just because a car is labeled a muscle car doesn't mean it's built to perform. Always do your research and make sure you're getting the power, reliability, and driving experience that's truly worth the investment. Thanks for watching. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our future content on everything muscle cars. Got any thoughts or experiences with these cars? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your stories. See you next time.